Hello and welcome to the Link Up. Today, we are going to continue our look at the COVID situation and the various vaccines and variants, as today we're reaching understanding on many things. Now, there always seems to be more questions than answers, but we rely on our specialist emergency physician, Dr. Brian Charles, to set us straight while giving it to us, straight up with no chaser. We've connected with many across the region, across the world during this pandemic, but there is one group we've not had the opportunity to link with, and they're right here at home. How has the pandemic impacted their community, and how have they dealt with it? We link up with businesswoman and president of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, Sakina Bakaria. Recently, we've been making that outreach to Africa, even as our country is forging ties and reconnecting with its west coast. Today, we connect with Victor Dogbe Kwarshi, who is a Ghanaian nurse who is actually living here in Barbados, and we'll discuss what it's been like for him, his COVID journey here, and that of his family back home. And I don't know if you know this or if I'm telling you for the first time, but on Tuesday, we celebrated Africa Day. That's right, May 25th. What is it? What is its significance? What is the history behind it? And how important is it to the African continent and beyond? To reach understanding, we'll link up with Ghana and embrace the vast knowledge and experience of the Honorable Fritz Baffer, who's the former Minister of Information and member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Communication in Ghana. Remember, you can participate. You can watch the stream on Facebook and YouTube and leave your comments or your questions in real time at CBC Barbados. But first, we'll link with Dr. Brian Charles after the break. Here's hoping that you're having a good day so far, that you're feeling, up and at 'em and looking forward to the weekend ahead. I know for some it's been a tiring week, and for others it's been one of continued confusion as you follow the news, both locally and internationally, and you're wondering what is going on. Well, we like to always get things straight and clear things up right here on the Link Up. And for that, we say good morning to our specialist emergency physician, Dr. Brian Charles. Good morning to you, Doc. Nice to see you this morning.
Good morning. Same here. Glad to be here.
Excellent. There's so much news that, is bandying about the place. When you think one particular country has been doing really, really well, all of a sudden, you wake up the next morning and you hear that a place like Melbourne in Australia, which seemed to have had it really under wraps, is now going through another wave. What exactly is happening? Why are we seeing this up and down and shift so much within recent months?
Yeah, I'll say that it's not only Melbourne. Look at Taiwan. Very surprisingly, Taiwan has had a big surge in the last week, and that was very surprising for a country that has had this under control since MERS in 2013 and the first SARS epidemic in 2002, they have now had a recent resurgence of COVID-19 in Taiwan. So, this is a very unpredictable disease, and this pandemic is not over. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, yes, vaccines are coming out, but don't forget, not many countries have had their vaccines, and even in the best of places where we are using the non-pharmacological barrier methods like sanitizing, face mask, and physical distancing, there are still surges coming. And the reason for that is that once the virus is allowed to spread from host to host, there will be mutations and there will be variants, and these variants now start to pick back up. So we have to be on our guard continuously with this pandemic.
I was going to bring up Taiwan when we were going to be looking at the US and their lessening of restrictions and the information from the CDC, because if there's one thing you do know, the Taiwanese, whenever you see them, because of their experience with MERS and so on, they are mask wearers, so that was one of the questions, and I'm still going to leave it for then. But one of the things I wanted to bring up with you was I was listening to the BBC a couple mornings ago. Very interesting segment that they had on diseases, and they were talking about Papua New Guinea and the rise of, I think it was polio, which everybody considered that they had under control and so on. And the reason for this was it was a vaccine-oriented virus this time rather than the original one, and this was a variant which had occurred in Papua New Guinea and in Indonesia because of this. And so I was thinking, well, if that can happen with polio, I'm not surprised then that it's happening now with COVID, because the last time we spoke, you described to us about India and how at the time you had said it was a double variant, but since then you told me that it was a triple one, and this is now a variant on the variant and not a variant on the virus. Is anybody confused yet?
Yes, yeah, we certainly are, and I'll tell you, as I've said time and time again, this is a novel virus, a new pandemic. We're only 1.5 years into it, and we're learning things every single day. And I'm sure, and I've said this before, that what I'd say today, 1 year later, is going to be very different. And we are seeing different things in terms of even the mutations and the variants and the possibilities of different presentations, even different presentations of COVID-19 we are seeing, in clinical practice. So it's all very new, and as you said, rather confusing.
It's rather confusing, and I worry, for those out there who might just throw their hands up in total and complete frustration and said, well, whatever is to be will be, or whatever like that, without thinking that the very first thing you mentioned in your introduction, when you spoke about the virus and so on, was it needs a host. So if we deny it that host, we kill it. Basically, that's what you're saying.
Yes. And that's the principle of public health, the public health ways of treating and managing and controlling the disease. If you have COVID, or if you're COVID positive, and even if you are asymptomatic, you need to stay away. You need to quarantine. You need to keep that virus to yourself so that you don't go ahead and spread it to others without you knowing that you're spreading it. And this is part of the difficulty with managing this pandemic, in that the majority of people are asymptomatic. They're not sick, but they can spread it to others who are vulnerable and who are at high risk of becoming very sick and dying. So it's difficult to get the message across that if you are COVID positive or if you are sick, that you need to stay away so that we can control this disease. It's all about control. There's no drug, there's no medication to treat it. We have a vaccine right now that will prevent severe disease and death, but that's as much as we have. But what we do know is that it needs a host. And the life cycle of the virus is 14 days. So if you keep to yourself for 14 days, it's going to die away and you're not going to spread it. We can treat this. We can manage this.
Yeah, but first of all, we got to manage ourselves. And I don't think that that's one of the things that all of the medical books in the world can prepare you for, and that is the human psyche, which I am
Yes,
learning in this pandemic is quite complex.
absolutely.
Right. So let's look at India, because that's a fascinating case study. I find it thoroughly fascinating, and I'm not in the medical fraternity because of what you had said. After reading up and you're learning about, how the virus spreads and so on, and then there are these variants, and then the next thing you come and blindside me with the fact that you can have a variant on the variant, forget the original. So now when you're telling me a triple variant, are you saying now that's a variant of the original?
Yes, that's right. So once the virus is allowed to survive, it mutates. And that's what viruses do. They change with every cycle, every time they replicate in your body. They are small changes. Some of these changes are good for the virus in that it makes them more transmissible, it makes them more infective, it makes them more deadly. You get more sick. Some of them no, and they just die out. What we've been finding is that they are these variants. Some of them have been so successful, for lack of a better word, that they have become prominent. So we've had the South African variant, we've had the Kent or the UK variant, we've had the Brazil variant, and now we have the Indian variant. And this Indian variant is rather it's very infectious. And in the UK right now, even though they have relaxed their entire restrictions, it seems as though this Indian variant is now taking over, and that is of very interest. And of note, remember that in February, it was deemed as though India had the pandemic under control. And then in the religious festivals that happened in March and April, with many people gathering, this allowed more and more people to spread the virus, and then the mutations came about, giving rise to the variants. And this is what, as you said, we have to be careful about in our communities in terms of socializing, in terms of getting together, because once our social nature comes to fore, then that gives the virus an opportunity to spread and more variants to come about. So very important, we have to curtail our social activities until this entire pandemic is over.
What's the argument that they're making in Tokyo for the Olympic Games? Why are they so concerned, and why are they so up in arms about the government not cancelling them again for another year?
I am not particularly sure. Remember that the Olympics, apart from us being a sporting event, it's a highly economic event with much financial gains, and the outlay that was done every time that you bid for an Olympics is so great that you hardly want to miss that opportunity. Now, the persons who are arguing against canceling this Olympics are arguing because of health reasons, and that is very understandable. The only way you can control your country's COVID disease is by restricting activity, restricting movement, and keeping the host protected. Having the Olympics could, and I say could, allow the importation of virus and its variants into Tokyo. And this is why the Tokyo government has extended its state of emergency to allow more vaccinations until a month before the Olympics is planned. Allow more vaccinations, allow restrictions of activity so that within Japan itself, there should be, and this is theoretical, there should be a limit in the number of active COVID cases so that they can now then concentrate on anything that's being imported into Japan by the Olympics. So that's the broad speaking how they're thinking of it at this point in time. But we all know it's a very fluid and dynamic situation.
Yeah, and I know they had their own variant, didn't they? I think
Early on,
in
yeah.
their early on. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I know that some people were concerned about was the fact that they were going to be blocking off something like 9 hospitals for the Olympic athletes and so on alone. So 9. My
Yes.
goodness. Okay, so, all right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at the CDC new guidelines, this time now for the USA, because I really don't think that that's for the rest of the world as yet. And they've only got something like 40% vaccinated. So,
30.
are they
Yep.
taking a risk? We're going to take a look at that when we come back. We're chatting with Dr. Brian Charles, specialist emergency physician, and I think the link up specialist when it comes to all things medical. And today we're taking a look at COVID. I mean, what else? We are still in the midst of this pandemic, and we always seek to give you the most up to date and correct information possible. And I try to ask questions on your behalf because if you think that you're confused, so am I. And I'm sitting down and I'm watching television and I'm seeing this breaking news. And the breaking news is that the CDC has come out with these new guidelines, which states that if you're fully vaccinated, you can chuck away the masks and go outside and love up and hug up your parents and your grandparents and so on, even those who are in the nursing homes and so on. And I'm thinking, that's trying to say to me that after being fully vaccinated that I can't get the virus and spread it? That's not what I heard. So please, Dr. Charles, the floor is yours.
Yes. So let's make something clear. The first thing is that the CDC is a U.S. institution and organization for the management of communicable diseases in the USA. That's one. The second thing is that last week they have studied the disease in the US and have set out new guidelines. And in summary, the new guidelines just as you've said, have said that fully vaccinated persons do not need to wear masks when they are indoors or outdoors and can socialize as usual, except for public travel and like in airports and on public transportation. The fact remains that as of last Thursday, the US was 38% fully vaccinated. And if you would have remembered from some of the talks that we've given before, that herd immunity is needed to be able to be confident about the decrease in transmissibility and decrease in the vulnerability, of your population. And for herd immunity, you need at least 70 to 80% of your population being immunized. Now, just as you said, it is confusing that with 38% of your population being fully vaccinated, that you can be confident enough to relax your restrictions to that level. That's one. The second thing is that from the data that's coming out of the US, from the Pfizer vaccine, I don't think they've released for the Moderna yet, fully vaccinated people have a 0.01% chance of transmitting the disease. So this is what gave them the confidence that they can relax the restrictions for fully vaccinated persons. The problem is that they are still a significant proportion of the population that's not vaccinated, as well as are highly susceptible to severe disease. And you know that even if you're not vaccinated, then you're at very high risk. And if you are vaccinated, you still have a chance of becoming ill. So it is. I don't think that the rest of the world is as confident as the US CDC is in terms of relaxing the guidelines as much as they are, with only a low percentage being vaccinated. Having said that, the important thing for us is to realize that that is a US based standard. And because we have in Barbados about 20% of our population being fully vaccinated, that does not mean that here in Barbados that we can relax and not wear our mask, or we cannot honor the physical and social distancing that our health authorities have advised. And so that needs to be perfectly clear so that we can still follow the protocols, still follow the guidelines, even if we are fully vaccinated. So that's very important to say.
You. And that's one of the things that we have to be very clear on, especially when we're delivering information, that we always state where we got it from, and let people know the region that it's speaking to. But then there will be some who will say, well, okay, we're supposed to wait on information from the WHO. That wasn't so reliable in the beginning. And to be fair, it is a learning curve for everyone. So even with the WHO, they are still learning as well. But those are the guidelines that we follow, correct?
Yes. That's very correct. We're following the WHO, and they have not made the recommendation for the fully vaccinated populations, people in our populations yet. And that's understandable because we have such a low level of vaccinations in the third world that we just cannot simply relax as has been done in the US. And remember, the decisions for the relaxation of the protocols is based on political, economic, social factors, and most of all to me, health factors. So there are very many different things that come into play for the decisions of how we make our protocols. Even with our directives here, people are asking, but our positivity rate is less than 1% for the last 2-3 weeks. Why can't we just do away with everything? But it's not as simple as that, because even if you have a low positivity rate, what about those people that are not being tested? and those people who are asymptomatic. So we still have to be very cognizant of the fact that just one figure does not mean that we can relax and we can leave the protocols out, because it is a complex decision-making process of which is science-based, and our health authorities are following these and giving the correct guidelines.
I would like to do a survey on and ask people why they're not going to get tested. Is it still a fear of the swab? Because I know in the early days that was one of the fears. But is it still that? With the advent now of the vaccine, has that changed people's minds? Do you think that you don't need to be tested? Because I have heard that that's one of the concerns, that we're not doing enough testing to really get a true idea about, you know, how much of this virus is in the community, where it is in the community. So what are the symptoms and so on that a person should, you know, be experiencing? Have they changed now, you know, with the virus mutating and so on all about the place? Are you still, if you feel that you've got a cold, is it as mild as that? Or do you really have to be feeling really ill and with a fever and so on? What are the symptoms we're looking at?
Right. So let me just address the first thing you mentioned first in terms of testing. Now, remember, the test is minimally invasive, so people are uncomfortable. And then there's a psychosocial stigma of, if you find out that you're positive, that you have to go into isolation for 14 days, you have to be secluded at Harrison Point or one of our hotels. Persons that we've spoken to do not want that, especially if they're asymptomatic or have mild disease. And this is one of the reasons why people are not coming forward for testing. But in opposition to that, it's important to come forward for testing, because we need to know how much of the virus is within our population so that we can make decisions going forward. So, you know, if you have any illness whatsoever, you know, come and get tested. The tests are being offered by the Ministry of Health free of cost, unless you go to a private institution where you may have to pay a nominal fee. But the importance is that we can get the data about how much virus is in the population. The second thing about your question is that if you have any symptoms at all, any viral type symptoms, flu, cough, cold, fever, headache, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, you know, you should get tested. And the reason for that, again, is that the coronavirus SARS-2 COVID disease presents in a myriad of different ways. You know, we have people who are coming with chest pain, just as though that they are having a heart attack, and you test them and they're COVID positive. And the chest pain is as a result of the effects of COVID on the heart muscle. So, you know, at this point in time, it is very important. And I would like to encourage all of Barbados to please come out and get tested whenever you are feeling sick. And if you are being contacted by the public health officials because of a likely exposure, please give the correct information and please come out and get tested. It is very important for us to know the correct numbers so that we can make decisions going forward, evidence-based decisions going forward.
Yeah, and it concerns me, you know, when I hear them say that people are not going forward to get tested, and I really couldn't figure out why, because you want to know, and you want to ensure that you don't pass it on to the people that you care about, you know. So if you're not feeling well, and look, there he goes again giving me new information, chest pain. I don't remember that being one of the symptoms. So, you know, it manifests itself in the body in different ways.
Yes. Yeah, that's
diarrhea,
very true.
you're saying, and vomiting and so on. So that's the digestive system as well. So it's not just what I hear people mentioning only is, I'm good, I can still taste and I can still smell.
Mm. Nope.
It's more to
Yeah.
it than that.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very interesting disease. And we have found, as we said, it's a new disease, but we have found the symptomatology to be so varied and so interesting, but, let us please follow the protocols, let us get tested so that we can get this and keep this under control. And if a vaccine is offered to you, take it, take both doses, because that's how we're going to get a handle on it.
Yeah, there's an open day today, I think, excuse me, and tomorrow, BIDC building and the Sandals Royal Conference Centre, and I heard the
Yes.
Winston Scott Polyclinic. So please, go and get that second dose. Now, this is leading into my next question because I heard on the news last night, Dr. Ferdinand was saying that the expiration date is coming up for those before April 6th. So what does that mean for
Right.
that
So
first
the
dose?
first batch of vaccines that we got have an expiration date of, I think, the 29th of May, which
Yes.
is tomorrow. So we are trying to use up all of those vaccines that are in stock so that we can make sure we go ahead with the next batch, which will have a later expiration date. As you know, we have certain ethics to obey and to follow, and one of those is we don't give medications which are stated to be expired, even
Right.
though some of the companies who are making them say that the expiration date is just a guide and can be used for a month or so later. We still follow strict ethical guidelines in administering these pharmacological agents. So yes, please, if you have a chance, go to the open day, get your vaccination, even if it means waiting in line a little bit. Carry some water, carry a stool to sit. It's well worth the wait and well worth the time. You're contributing to the protection of the entire community. So we encourage you to do that.
Okay, some questions that keep on appearing, and in the last few minutes that I have you, and thank you so much always for allowing us to pull you in and grab your knowledge, because there are things out there that people are still a little concerned about, and one question that keeps on cropping up is the question of, is there any trace of the virus in the vaccine that we're taking?
No, no, absolutely not. So the vaccine, in fact, all the vaccines that are being manufactured now, none of them have the live virus. None of them have the virus at all. The mRNA vaccines have the genome that gives a message to produce the spike protein, and the other vaccines, the other vector virus vaccines, where the spike protein is taken from the virus and attached to another virus, which cannot harm the body. So you actually do not get the SARS-CoV-2 virus in any of the vaccines that are being used at this point in time. That may change, I don't know, but no, you cannot get the virus itself. You're getting a piece of the virus for which the body is going to recognize as being foreign, and then the body is going to mount a response to defend itself against that part of the virus.
Okay. Next question is, have you, in your sphere of emergency medicine, come across anyone with long COVID, and what are they going through and how are they? And explain what long COVID is, because I will most probably give the incorrect definition.
Right. So COVID-19 is an acute illness, usually respiratory, when you're symptomatic. And remember, about 20% of persons get a moderate to severe illness. And these symptoms in the acute phase would be things that you can get with any viral illness. And I mentioned some of them before: fever, headaches, pain behind the eyes, stuffy nose or congestion, sore throat, cough, sneezing. And then you have the gastrointestinal symptoms of nausea, vomiting, some diarrhea. You have the not so common symptoms of inability to taste and inability to smell. And then you have the severe like symptoms now of shortness of breath and pneumonia like symptoms and things like clotting and strokes and heart attacks. So this is a myriad of different things in the acute phase. After recovery from COVID, even those persons with mild COVID can get something called long haul syndrome, whereby they get some of these symptoms that are lasting for very long time, 6 months, 9 months. And usually what we've seen in the literature is that persons complain of things like brain fog, difficulty in concentrating, disorientation, memory lapses, and those kind of symptoms. But very interesting that you've asked the question of have we seen any persons with long haul syndrome? And just yesterday, I was exposed to a gentleman who had recovered from COVID, and he had recovered from COVID about 3 months ago. And he was saying that he finds it difficult to get up and walk around. His muscles don't seem to act like how they used to before. And this is all part of long haul syndrome. And so just as the acute phase can present in very different ways, we are still learning about long haul syndrome and how to treat it, to be honest. So yes, we have had a couple of cases here with long haul syndrome, but it's still in evolution. We don't have a specific treatment for long haul syndrome apart from symptomatic and symptomatic treatment for whatever the patient may present with.
Wow. It's a learning curve for everyone. The medical fraternity, us here in society. But one thing is for sure, it's here. It's here to stay for a while. And therefore, we've got to learn to manage it. And we've got to learn to manage ourselves and our behavior to keep everyone else and ourselves safe. Thank you so much, Dr. Charles.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm sure that we'll have you soon again as more things happen and we need to reach further understanding. Thank you. Stay safe.
Yeah,
we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we get an opportunity to touch base with the Muslim community and to find out how they've been impacted during this whole journey. We're going to do that when we come back. She's a proud Muslim Barbadian woman, a wife, mother of 2 teenagers. She's co-director of a family-owned business and president of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies. Her name is Sakina Bakaria, and it is definitely a pleasure to have you join us today, Sakina. Nice to see you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Did you get an opportunity to listen to my chat with Dr. Charles?
Yes, I did listen to some of it.
Right. Wasn't that fascinating? How difficult it is to get a handle on this virus and changing one's lifestyle, the way one lives, and just to be a little bit more conscious of how we can affect others. So I am interested to find out, how did our Muslim community, deal and handle with the COVID journey over these over a year?
So locally, well, first I should say Dr. Charles, his points in terms of the symptoms and the additional symptoms that we would never have known had he not highlighted them, did fascinate me as well, because I caught that part and he was talking about the muscle aches and stuff.
Exactly.
And the other things that were not common symptoms when they were talking about what to expect when you have COVID. So that did raise some alarms, but I
Yes.
did. I did join those long open day lines, and I have been fully vaccinated, and I
Good.
have been encouraging my relatives and friends, those who can, to please go and do so as well, because we, as he said, we need to protect ourselves and the community at large. So our
Exactly.
community in Barbados has been impacted just like the wider community. From last year to this year, we have had instances where uh, things have regulated a bit. So fasting last year in Ramadan last year was we were restricted from malls, we were restricted from interacting with family members, having our traditional, breaking the fast together and having our traditional Eid as well. This year, the mosques have opened up with a limited capacity. Persons have been going out while observing the protocols. We're still restricted in terms of gatherings of certain sizes, but I know like immediate families would have had the opportunity to maybe just keep within a bubble and do things that we would not have been able to do last year. The Barbados Association Muslim Ladies has been, we have a Ramadan hamper drive, which we ran, this is about our 8th year into it. Last year, the scope of it changed where we ended up going with grocery vouchers to assist persons within our community and the wider community that need the extra assistance. This year we went ahead and did the grocery vouchers again, and what we realized is that our needs increased. What we would have accommodated for last year did significantly increase this year. And although the fundraising was a little slower than it was last year, we were able to accommodate as many persons as we could on our list. So we're grateful for that opportunity, which the general community comes out and assists with that as well. In terms of I mean, just functioning as a Muslim person and is as it is for the general community. We have to observe our protocols. We have to make sure that we protect ourselves, persons who would be in the itinerant traders business and persons who would have to interact with people. They would have been restricted in terms of movement during our lockdown in February. As an organization and as the umbrella body and persons that have a community service interest at heart, we would encourage everyone to make sure you maintain your protocols. We're not only protecting us individually, we're protecting our whole community, and we are all part of the Barbadian society. We need to do our part.
All have certain, excuse me, restrictions when it comes to certain aspects of your cultural practices. And I'm thinking now of the death of a member of the family and so on. The amount of time that you all allow for keeping the person before you can actually bury them is a shorter space of time. So
That's right.
under all of the protocols and the restrictions and so on, how did you all manage with those kind of practices?
It's interesting that you touched on the death of a loved one. I lost my grandfather in
Oh,
February.
my
And yes,
condolences.
thank you very much. It was an adjustment on the entire family because we had to restrict the persons who would normally attend the funeral. The extended family were restricted from coming to pay their final respects because he passed away the Friday morning. And traditionally, we would like to have the funeral as soon as possible. He was hospitalized for 2 days beforehand. He was elderly. My grandfather was blessed to have lived 90 years. And he was, as I told persons, he came here from India, but my grandfather was the Barbadian for us because he instilled all the Barbadian, values, and he had a love for Barbados. And so the traditionally because of how he passed, and he was so when he went to the hospital, in those 2 days he was in hospital, there was no one that could be with him because obviously COVID protocols had to be maintained. When he passed, it was early the Friday morning, and um, because of his age, because he was hospitalized, they were able to get the body released so that we could conduct the funeral the same day. But even then, it was restrictions in terms of the amount of persons that can actually go and view the body, the amount of persons. So we're limited. We were at that time we were limited to 10 persons going to the funeral, and that's what we had to stick to. So it was like between his children and his nephew, and the ladies don't traditionally go to the funeral, go to the burial ground. So there was that elimination. But in terms of his grandchildren, I mean, I went to see my grandfather's body, but my husband or my children could not have gone because it would then eliminate the space for someone who was closer to him to go. And it was a tragic time because traditionally, when a family member dies, the entire family or and the community rallies around that person. You'd have, days where you'd be at the home of the deceased person and just comforting those that have been left behind. And for that space of time, I could not go there to be with my grandmother. I could not, we could not grieve together as an extended family. We had to do it isolated from our own homes. We spent a lot of time on WhatsApp communicating with each other, the cousins checking in with my parents, my father especially, and just making sure that we're there for each other the way the COVID protocols permitted, and we don't endanger anyone by stepping out and doing something that we should not have been doing. So it really was an adjustment, and I told the other person that this round of lockdown hit me harder than it did last.
Yeah.
Because this round, because we had an immediate family member, because we lost that immediate family member, we couldn't be there for each other physically. It really did force you to face your feelings and your grievance, your grief directly, individually. And not everyone has the coping tools to do that on their own. You need that family support. You really do need that family support.
Human beings are really and truthfully social animals, and I think
Yes.
that the pandemic has really driven this home, especially when you were isolated during lockdown.
That's right.
Some people who might have had large families, they drove them crazy by just being all in one space and on top of each other, and you just needed that space. And then there are the others who not so much, so they're home alone and they have no interaction with anyone, and that brought on its own kind of mental challenges. But I think of the Muslim faith and I think of the practices that you all have. On a daily basis, you're supposed to pray and visit your mosque. And I wonder how then being in lockdown changed for you in a situation like that.
So it did force you to turn to your God and to turn to God. Your only reliance, the only person you can turn to and trust is God. So it did force you to reach into your spirituality and explore your spirituality. So traditionally we pray 5 times a day. The major mosques in Barbados do not currently have general accommodation for females. That is a cultural practice, not a religious practice. So the females would generally pray at home, but I start my day at 5. So I got up this morning and I prayed, and then there are 5 prayers throughout the day. Outside of the prayers and the obligatory prayers, there are other things that you can do, like constantly being in the remembrance of God. And not only that doesn't mean that you need to spread your prayer mat and pray. It means doing good things as well, like when you're kind to others, helping, being of service. Those are things that increase your spirituality and your connection to God. So when you had being in lockdown, you were forced to face, especially going through a tragedy. You feel lost, you feel, desperate at some point. I'm sure each of us went through our own little bouts of depression because of what we lost someone who was a constant in our life. My grandfather hadn't traveled from 1983. That's the last time he traveled. So he was constantly there. Each time you go, he was there. So having come out of lockdown and having to go there to visit my grandmother and not seeing him there, that also brought it back up. So that's, it's like you constantly know that God is with you, but yet in your times of destitute and your times of sorrow, that's when you get the greatest comfort from God. So you pray on. So at times I found it was difficult for me to concentrate by praying my Quran, but then I would repeat things in my head, like repeat verses that I know that will bring me that solitude and that comfort. If I that will help me. So it's also about being of service. So I was given the opportunity to assist with the packaging of the care packages, and I use that as a tool, as an outlet to kind of help me cope with his loss, and that was throughout the course of February. So every night, the same day he was buried, the Friday afternoon, the Friday evening, I found myself at Queen's College because I needed to do something to keep myself busy in service of someone. Maybe it was selfish, but it was a way of me coping and giving to somebody who I know that I
That
they
was
need the
your
help.
coping mechanism.
That's my coping. Service is
Yeah,
my coping mechanism.
service. And that's
Service and
understandable.
volunteerism. Yeah, service
That's
and volunteerism is
understandable.
my coping. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, Sakina, and when we come back, I'd like to talk to you about the association. And then
Okay.
also, I know you're of East Indian heritage, so have you had an opportunity to chat with any of your family perhaps there who can tell you about their journey that they're going through right now? But we're going to do that when we come back.
Okay. Thank you.
The Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, the BAML, that was founded in 2010. And over the years, as Sakina has said, we've particularly seen them in the whole role of service. We've seen them, with their hamper drive. But what exactly is the association about? And who best to tell us than the president of the association herself, Sakina Beccario. So, Sakina, tell us about the association. What is your mandate?
So we are the unique organization. We are the only organization in Barbados that caters to the holistic needs of Muslim women and girls. That extends now in, although that is our primary focus, that has extended in terms of the general community because we have had requests or assistance, from general community as well. We have four categories that we split our work in. So there's advocacy. We would advocate for girls to be educated. We would advocate for females, for spaces for females in mosques. We would advocate for, our founder was recently part of the group of girls that was advocating for the Protect Our Girls movement. We would advocate for anything in the society that's holistic, and we can see that there's a need for voices to be heard for marginalized persons, to speak up for those who need the push behind them. So it is focused on Muslim based. Islam is our principles, but we do advocate for things that are society's challenges in society where persons are needed. Education is a big focus for us. We like to see as many persons, especially female Muslim women and girls, to be educated, whether it is self-employed, whether it is academic, a skill. We have a fund which we have restructured into it. We are in the process of restructuring to make sure girls get an education. They have the tools necessary because education you can't take away from anyone, and service you can't take away from anyone. Our focus is also we look at community involvement and community service, whether it is within our own community, having social events for our girls, our and extended it into the wider community. We have not had a social, we have not had a physical meeting since February 1st last year.
Wow.
So that was our last event, and that was our World Hijab Day fashion show. So that has somehow affected. I mean, the team has met several times via Zoom and via technology, but we have not met in person, and which is something that we see the need for it, because we can't plan effectively unless we have that feedback from each other in the same space. Your focus, when you're in the same space, your focus is on one goal.
Right.
But our mandate is basically to make sure that we have a safe space for Muslim women and girls, a safe space for generally for women and girls. COVID has also seen us launch our hotline. We have a gender-based violence hotline, or a hotline for persons who just need that extra. We have two qualified counselors who man the hotline, and they're there to assist as needed. Specifically, situations that are for Muslim women and girls, but we have entertained calls from outside of our community. And one of the speakers, one of the counselors is fully fluent in Gujarati, which is the East Indian language that most of our local community speak or have experience in. But our mandate is to make sure that we have a safe space for Muslim women and girls.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned just now, sorry, excuse me, my allergies are dripping, but the World Hijab Day, one of the myths that many people have is about the hijab and not quite understanding, you know, if it's a choice or if it's, you know, you have to wear it. So could you clear that up for us?
Sure. So hijab is loosely translated as a veil. It's a covering. So it's not the piece of cloth I wear on my face or head. That's what it. And there's a hijab. A hijab is a mandate for males. Males would not have this. It's a modesty. So it's modesty in your dress, your attire, your behavior, and whatnot. The Quran has guidelines that women must cover. However, the Quran is our book, it is our guidelines, and Islam is an individual choice based on guidelines. So it's an individual interpretation of Islam. Now, many people will disagree with me on my statement. I make no apologies for it, because at the end of the day, spirituality has to come from your heart. Right. You have a religion that tells you you must believe in God. You must pray 5 times a day. You must fast in the month of Ramadan. You must give charity. And these are 5 pillars. And the 5th pillar would be you should go visit Saudi Arabia and perform pilgrimage once you can afford it. But if you look at the meaning behind why you do each of these things, it is a lot about your own personal connection with God. So I wear the hijab because I observe this guideline that the Quran states that they would like you to do. The Quran also says that you should not be forced. So women or males, no one should be forced into doing anything. So you need to set the guidelines and encourage persons, but not force them as well. Because sometimes when you're forced, you go the other direction. You don't want to do it. You rebel and you object. When you are encouraged and you're around a circle of people that constantly do it, you then observe, you have a positive role models and positive forces around you. You will then observe and take in those role models and those roles as well. So it's not forced; it's a guideline mandated in the Quran, and it is very highly encouraged. But you shouldn't be forced as well.
All right, because you do see some women wearing it and others who don't, and I think that there is a misunderstanding of the Muslim religion, the faith, the traditions that you have, and just like in everything, there are extremes, and we just need to get to understand each other. The more that you do, the more you realize that we're a lot alike than you think. You know,
That's very
you
true.
mentioned things like mental health, physical health, gender-based violence, nutrition, wellness, you know, relationships. Those are all human things and things that
Correct.
all societies are going through and have to deal with. And also, now you also have a journey of a pandemic, which is really and truthfully having a negative and tremendous impact on India. And I can't begin to imagine what that's like, you know, having family there and seeing what is happening. So have you had an opportunity to chat with your family? We've got something like 3 minutes left. Time really flies during this
That's
show,
correct.
honestly. But have you had an opportunity to chat with your
So
family
I
there?
don't have any immediate family, but
Okay.
I have distant family there. And yes, it really did. There was a point in time where the village that my grandparents are from, every time I opened my phone for the space of a week or week and a half, there was some, the prayer that we say is from God we come, to God we return. And that's what I was saying on my phone. It's like each time you open your phone, and it may not be someone that I'm directly related to, but it's somebody that I know. So I don't think there's a household in Barbados from the Muslim community that has not been touched by death, whether it is locally or from India within the last two months. And the situation there is grave. There are places where they don't have access to the care or that we have here, and they have to depend on local resources or depend on what family members can send overseas from overseas, and even that is difficult in these times. So it really is heartbreaking, and sometimes I have to tune out, but then and then focus back on it, and then now that we can, you go and either send a message or a phone call and just pay your respects, or as the best thing that we can do is pray for all of those who have lost a loved one, or all of those who are still suffering, because they're still suffering there, even if they have lost a loved one or they haven't. The situation there is really dire.
Right. And how is the association or the community moving towards perhaps giving assistance or lending assistance if you can?
So not our association directly, but the wider community, the wider Muslim community here, especially those who have direct linkages, like a father or a brother, or a close relative there, they have been doing what they can in terms of fundraising. I'm not sure in terms of how widely it has been accessed, because there's so much of a need right now, whether it's locally and internationally. There's so much of a need for persons for assistance. But there are a couple of groups that have a direct linkage that would have started before COVID times and would continue to assist where they can.
Right.
But lately, there have been fundraising for the brothers and sisters in Palestine. So they've been assisting that in terms. So there's quite a bit of our local Muslim bakers and even some stores that have been doing fundraising to assist those as well, the persons that have been misplaced, or set aside, or have been just disadvantaged in Palestine as well.
What would you like us, the wider Barbadian community, to know about Palestine and the conflict that's happening there? You have like 30 seconds.
It is a human right violation. It is a human right violation. The Palestinian people decide they need to live in core. They need to have their spaces. You can't come, just like I wouldn't want someone to come here and take what's mine. You can't go and take away. We need to bring recognition. We need to talk about it. We need to have our government speak up against it and recognize the state of Palestine, because that is one thing our government hasn't done. And we need to speak up.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sakina. And
You're very welcome.
I've put out feelers trying to connect with anyone who can bring us greater clarity on that whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because truly I think that we are very ignorant in the truest sense about what is happening there and why it's happening. So Thank you for sharing, and thank you very much for helping us reach understanding, and we wish you and the community all the best and, continued health, good health. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we continue to reach understanding right here as we connect on the link up with Victor Dogbe Quarshie. And Victor is a Ghanaian, yes, but he's living in Barbados. He's a nurse, and so therefore he's giving of himself in terms of his career, but we'd also like to find out about his journey when we come back. As you know, Barbados has been making its outreach to the motherland, and as a matter of fact, here on the Link Up, that is something that we have been doing as well, as we reach out and touch base with those in Ghana and Liberia and the western coast of Africa. But we didn't have to travel over the sea today to make our link up. We're linking up right here in Barbados because we have Ghanaian Victor Dogbe Quarshie right here with us. Hi, Victor. Nice to have you with us this morning. Can you hear me? Okay, I don't think he can. Can you hear me? Okay, we're going to let him set up, but just let me give you a little background to Victor. He is a registered nurse, and his specialty, well, his interests are in NCDs like diabetes and emergency health care. He's been living in Barbados for the better part of a year, and he is working as a registered nurse with the David Thompson Health and Social Services Complex. And during his free time, Victor likes to ride his bicycle and take long walks and write poetry. Yeah, I could see that as a great way to relieve some stress. You know, it's been a very stressful time for us all. But can you imagine what it's like being part of the medical fraternity and being one of the frontline workers? Nobody told you that this pandemic would occur. And so here you are in a new country. You are far away from home, and you are now among people who are going through a pandemic and in lockdown. So we wonder what exactly that experience was like. So Victor, I've shared you with everyone, you know, and I'm so happy that you're able to join us this morning, and I love the colors. I do believe that is one of your Ghanaian shirts. Am I right?
Yeah, you are right.
Tell us about that, and let's start to talk about Victor Quarshie. Who is he and what makes him tick? Okay. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm Victor Dogbe Quarshie. I am a Ghanaian. I'm from the eastern part of Ghana, from a small town called Chuje. The town is actually very close to the Togo border. That sometimes if you are in my village and actually see the Republic of Togo.
Oh,
I am a nurse. I have been practicing for the past 10 years. I have basically worked in emergency nursing, but I also have a special interest in non-communicable diseases, especially diabetes. Uh, I actually, when I was doing my degree, I did my research actually in diabetes. Um, my hobbies, basically, I like cycling. And when I'm a little bit stressed or a little bit too happy, I write poetry too. Uh, basically, that is. I have a wonderful daughter called Asempa. Asempa is a tree word which means good news because having her is one of the best news that I've ever had in
wow.
my life. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
She'll
How
be
is it
5 years.
pronounced? How's her name
As
pronounced?
Asempa. It is spelled ASE.
Asempa.
Perfect, 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 perfect. It basically means good news.
Good news.
Yeah.
Well, the
She'll be
good news
five
is
years
that, oh, she'll be 5 years. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
in December. Yes, on the 25th of December. Yeah.
Christmas Day.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Extra special. Definitely good news.
It is, it is, it is. That's why she's my good news.
That's beautiful. So,
Yeah.
your journey into nursing, how did that come about, Victor? Did you always want to be a nurse? Did you see yourself in that profession?
No, not really. I initially wanted to be a teacher. So at the age of 12, I was asking my dad how much teachers are paid in Ghana. I asked my teachers if their salaries are good or not. Basically, my interest was in the salaries, as a matter of fact. Until after secondary school, a rector, I am not a Catholic, I am a Presbyterian, but I lived amongst Catholics. So a reverend sister invited me to her office one day, asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I want to be a teacher. She said, okay. She sees I could be a good teacher, but how about nursing? I was like, I'm not very sure. I'm comfortable with blood and everything else. She said, nursing is not always about blood, and you could teach in nursing too, so I should consider it. She asked me to visit her another time, and I told her, okay, I've considered, I'm interested. She was actually the head of, the Reverend Sister was actually the head of a hospital in Ghana. So she asked me to bring a letter to work as a cleaner in the hospital. So I sent the letter. I was employed immediately and I started my cleaning job. Her aim was for me to watch what the nurses do and see if I like it. And as a fact, in about 6 months, I had fallen in love with nursing. She further went ahead to buy the nursing training school form for me, helped me fill the application, and 10 years down the line, I don't regret that decision.
Right. And you've specialized in non-communicable diseases, specifically diabetes. Was there any specific
Ye-
reason why you veered
Um,
towards that?
so this is what happened. Whilst working as a junior nurse in Sugankokwe, one of the beautiful towns in Ghana, I realized that there were a lot of diabetes cases coming into the facility, and they were coming from only one area of the town and amongst a certain family. So I started wondering why that family, why are they the only ones in the entire village, in the entire town that had the diabetes? So when I happened to further my education to have my degree, and it was time to do a research, I wanted to understand exactly why that community has a high case of diabetes compared to other communities in the locality. Basically, that was why. And also, we started having a high case of diabetes in Ghana. Initially, Ghana was battling with uh, uh, influences. The last we started moving from our villages to the cities. A lot of non-communicable diseases started coming on the rise. So that was the main reason why I decided to
I'm
go
interested.
into.
I'm interested to find out because it seems as though diabetes, that's the case the world over.
Yes,
And I know that within the Caribbean region, they've spoken,
yes,
you know, about our diet, our nutrition, exercise, and so on.
yes.
Is that the case in Ghana as well?
It is actually. As a matter of fact, now a lot of Ghanaians are not eating the ground provisions, even though we have a lot of them in Ghana. Most people
How
are
come?
gravitating towards. I think it's the mentality that eating refined food, canned foods, etc., are things that enlightened people do. But the truth is that most enlightened people now do not eat canned foods, do not spend money on food that will buy them diseases. They would rather eat food from the ground, foods they grow at their own backyards. And I see a lot of that in Barbados. There is not a single house I go into that they don't have a garden behind the house. And that was the case in Ghana until recently, that most people do not have backyard gardens anymore. So having backyard gardens,
You're teaching me something because I've obviously been under the wrong impression. Here was I thinking that you all eat so well and correctly. You know, the good food, the one that actually grows on the tree or from the ground and not
yeah,
from the can. And now you're telling me, no, you all are pretty much
the interesting,
following the rest of the world.
we are following the rest of them blindly, as a matter of fact. The truth is that we have all the ground provisions, the natural foods and vegetables that you think of. And you can buy them virtually nothing at no cost at all in Ghana. You could get for free, but most people, in order to show a class, decide to eat foods that refined. In Ghana, we got rice, for instance, but Ghanaians would prefer rice that are from countries, and neglecting the wholesome rice that have our farmers produce. Um, that is basically our problem. That is basically the challenge that we face. But however, if you move to the hinterlands of Ghana, into the villages, places that are quote unquote not well developed, they live well, they live healthy, they live longer than the average life expectancy of a Ghanaian. Ghana, our life expectancy for a female is 7 years,
Is
and
how
for
much
a
you
male
broke
is,
up? Sorry, you broke up.
oh,
Is
sorry.
how old?
Oh, yeah, I was talking about in the hinterlands of Ghana, people still eat healthy because they grow their own foods, they harvest food from their own farms and garden, and straight into the pot. No uh, fertilizers. They use manure from the animal raising to grow such foods. So you're right, persons in such areas live longer than average life expectancy. In Ghana, the average life expectancy for a female is 70 years, and for a male is 67 years. Um, most of the times, you see people in away around 63 years, and that is the major culprit that heart disease and cerebrovascular accident or stroke. That is the major cause of death in Ghana.
Right.
And I believe that if we are able to move back to those days where we grow what we eat, etc., we would
Less
actually
salt.
live longer,
Yeah, less
longer than the
sugar, less
70s.
salt.
Yes,
Less. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah. Um, no, please. I have to ask you about the shirt, and I did. Is there a story behind it? And I have a question for you from one of our visitors, viewers. So I'll just ask hers first. Lanita Farrell, one of our Facebook viewers, is asking, did you ever find out why the people had diabetes in that area? I really want to know.
Okay. So let me first answer that question and then come back to the shed.
Yeah, that's fine.
What we find out was that diabetes runs, one of the major causes of diabetes is that it runs in certain families. So basically what we found out was that that family, that lineage has ancestry far back as 100 years ago who have diabetes. So it is something that is passed from generation to generation to generation. As to the reason why it is that family that has the diabetes, only that family, we are unable to do that research at this point. But I am sure that we could, as a thing, we could actually say that it is a gene that is culprit in that family having the diabetes, since it runs in the family. Yeah, that is what I think. About this shed, it actually does not have any story behind it. I found it online, and I liked the picture. I took the picture to a tailor in my neighborhood, and he was able to design this for me. And I'm very happy to.
I love the colors.
Thank you.
I find that sometimes, and I'm not generalizing, I find a lot of men like a lot of darker, more solemn colors, and they get teased sometimes if they go really colorful, but I love it, and
Thank you.
Definitely.
Actually, this is the first time I'm wearing this shirt.
Well, good. We are very honored. But when you look then at your journey from Ghana then to Barbados, was it much of a cultural shock, or did you find that the cultures kind of meshed?
I think the cultures meshed in a lot of ways. For instance, if you take the food, let's talk about the obvious, the weather. The weather in Barbados is basically the same as the weather in Ghana. Sometimes I even feel the weather in Barbados is a bit hotter, because I was at the beach the other day and I nearly had sunburns. I never had sunburns in Ghana at the beach. So I was actually surprised that I was all tanned all over. I quickly had to put on a shirt. If you take the aspect of food, I spent the Christmas with a colleague of mine, actually Boxing Day with a colleague Barbadian, and the food he prepared was basically the same foods that we have in Ghana: yams, potatoes. He prepared a food that looks like, they call it kuku. It looks like something we call in Ghana banku or akple. The same consistencies. You use cornmeal for that. The only difference was that in Ghana we usually prepare our soup separately, and then the kuku separately. So you take a piece of the kuku, dip it in the soup, and then you eat it and enjoy it. That is what we do. Fish. In Ghana, we eat a lot of fish, and obviously in Barbados, surrounded by an ocean, Barbados also eat a lot of fish. Hospitality. Barbadians are very hospitable. To be frank with you, Ghana is one of the most hospitable countries in the world, I think, in Africa especially. But when you compare the hospitality of Barbadians to that of Ghanaians, it is very marvelous. After a week working at a clinic, I hardly buy fish anymore, because anytime a client is coming to the clinic, he or she will bring me fish. People will bring me vegetables, carrots, potatoes, and breadfruit. I have never bought breadfruit in Barbados.
Well, you're in the country, so you're going to get, especially that country, hospitality. Extra special people. Always sharing what they have. Yes.
They are very warm. I cannot. I haven't traveled wide, But with what I see, I think Barbadians have the biggest hearts, the warmest hearts, and I if I have to make a decision of living anywhere else apart from Ghana, that decision will be to live in Barbados, probably specifically St. John, because they are very nice. They are very nice, and the relationship between uh, the people I work with at the clinic, you don't see any, for lack of better word, bossiness amongst anybody. They see us as equals. Tasks are shared equally. When there is any emergency, everybody puts the hand to the wheel, and then
Excellent.
we push. It's actually very wonderful.
We're
So
so
Barbados is
looking
a nice
forward.
place.
We're so looking forward to this outreach that, and learning so much. And what we learn from you reveals a lot about ourselves as well. And, I was mentioning the other day that it's unfortunate that in many cases we don't know a lot about each other and that we're only now
It's
beginning to
true.
do this. And so
It's
this
true.
makes it extra special. And thank you so much for the service that you have done for us, especially
Thank you
during
too.
this COVID time and putting
Thank you
your
for
own
having
health
us.
at risk for to come here and assist us. And we certainly are very, very grateful. And we're going to continue to make the outreach, and we're going to chat with you again, Victor, at some time. So you continue
Okay.
to stay safe and stay well,
You
please.
too.
Thank
You too.
you.
Take care of yourself. Thank you very much for me.
You are welcome. Touching base with one of the Ghanaian nurses here in Barbados, Victor Dogbe-Korshi, and you realize, you see, as we reach understanding today, the more we think we're different, we realize that's not really true, that we're pretty much the same. Now, this week, we celebrated Africa Day. We celebrated it on Tuesday, May 25th. And what exactly is Africa Day, and what is the significance of it? We're going to find out. We're going to get the information that we need from the Honorable Fritz Bafour, and I'll tell you about Mr. Bafour when we come back. Each year on May 25th, Africans around the globe celebrate Africa Day. We celebrated it here in Barbados, and the day commenced to commemorate the first union of African countries back in 1963. And today we take the opportunity to chat with a very knowledgeable individual. His nephew described him as a historian. He knows everything there is to know, and he explains it in such an easy way. He's a veteran broadcaster. He was also the Minister of Information in Ghana, and he is currently a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Communication in Ghana. And I'm speaking about the Honorable Fritz Bafour. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning and it's good afternoon here.
Ah,
I'd like
yes.
to make a little correction. I'd like to make a little correction. I'm no more a member of parliament. I retired from parliament
Yes, former.
in 2016.
Former.
Yes, so I am a former member of parliament.
Former. But you know, one minister, always a minister. We will always raise you, excuse me, as such.
Okay.
Can you put for us who are now basically learning so much about the motherland and so on, could you tell us what is the significance of Africa Day? Okay, he's right. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. What is the significance of Africa Day?
The wave, what was called the wind of change, came about in sub-Saharan Africa in 1957, when Ghana got its independence on March 6th of that year. And it led to the leader of the country at the time, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of blessed memory, who was our first prime minister, later on became the first president of Ghana, working with other African heads of state to set up an organization that would seek the interest and the liberation of Africa, because most of the countries at the time were not independent and were under colonial rule. So that was what happened. And when they met in Addis Ababa, they formed the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union. And as a result of that, we've always commemorated that day as a day when Africa came together. And as a result also of that organization being founded, we accelerated the independence of most of the African nations at the time. And the last African nation to be independent was South Sudan, which was part and parcel of Greater Sudan some years back. So all the 54 plus African nations are now free from colonial rule in some form or some other. And we celebrate that on the 5th of May every year.
It's also an opportunity for you all to reflect on the progress that you have made, I'm sure, by, the achievement of the goals and especially when it looks at freedoms of Africans and human rights. But because your colonial pasts were so diverse, I think, one wonders at that word union. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay,
very
excellent.
Well. Yeah.
Excellent. And one wonders at the word union, because whenever one hears about Africa, unfortunately, one always also hears about conflict. And therefore, with the 33, I think, or 32 signatory countries in the beginning, and now it has grown. Yes. What is that unity to the organization, and how has it progressed?
I'll tell you that originally it was an ideal, but it was an objective that every African nation at the time wanted to achieve. The funny thing is that that nations are artificial constructs. And if you want to look at Europe, countries like Germany and Italy and the Netherlands and Belgium were all artificial constructs. They were not homogeneous organizations per se. There are very few homogeneous African countries, the only country on the continent. For instance, one of the few countries that has one language is Rwanda, and see what happened there.
Yes.
If you go to Rwanda, you'll find out that there's no real difference between those who call themselves the Hutus and the Tutsis, for example. So in reality, because it's an artificial construct, and we've come together as a result of the influence and innovation of the European colonialists at the time, the imperialists who took over our country and carved off Africa As you know the partitioning of Africa by Bismarck in the 1880s or
Yes.
somewhere like that. So the artificial construct is what has created that problem. Because, for instance, Ghana is surrounded by Cote d'Ivoire to the west, Burkina Faso to the north, Togo to the east, and yet the borders that separate us, separate people of the same language and of the same ethnicity. I hate the word ethnicity because
So do I.
it doesn't really describe the people, because especially in Ghana, where we are exogamous and we marry out, ethnicity is actually a fallacy. It's maybe the area that you live in, you're governed by certain traditions and cultural practices and the environment. So you'll say you come from a particular area, but it's not by blood, it's usually by location and language.
Okay, there are two things there, and forgive me, it's how I sometimes can jump from, because of things you might say.
It doesn't matter.
And also things
Yeah.
I remember. One of the things I remember from a previous conversation that I had with a Ghanaian counterpart was the fact that your name, excuse me, can not only reflect your family, but the place, the region that you're from. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, normally, the thing is that naturally we are very, very taken in with ancestral respect and reverence. We revere our ancestors. We don't worship them, we revere them, and we believe that they are present in the spiritual world. One of the reasons why Africans are misunderstood a lot of is because we are very spiritual people. And to a man, everybody has some form of link into the spirit world. Now, the thing is that if you are born on a particular day, you are given the name of the day. If you and let's say with some of the groups, you are named after an ancestor or named somebody within that group who is renowned or known. So that is it. The languages are, as I said, they pertain to the area you live in and the kind of environment you're in and the kind, whether you're a fisherman or a hunter or something. All those things influence the language and the linguistic connotations that you may use.
Right. And then now, you used the phrase just now, marry out. What does that mean?
Yes. It's Ghana is unique in a certain way that the so-called ethnic groups all marry out. We don't marry in. We prefer to marry from outside the maybe the group. I mean, it's not unknown. It's very, very much a popular thing. In fact, in our midst, you'll find out that most towns were founded by somebody who went out of the town to look for a wife, and then met a wife and set up a new family and a new community and all that. We have that very much in Ghana. And I can give you an example that we've only had one head of state who married from within the host group that he belonged to. All our heads of state have married women from outside that the group. And as I said, I don't want to use the ethnic group.
Yes,
tribe.
understood.
The word tribe I find it insulting. But let's say you're from Accra and you go and marry a woman from Kumasi, or you marry a woman from Tamale in the north, or Bolgatanga, which is also in the north. It is not something that is unheard of. It's a big practice that we have. So Ghanaians very, very together when it comes down to that. And this was actually cemented by Kwame Nkrumah, who tried to outlaw the use of the word tribe or hometown per se. Because when we say hometown, it's not where you were born. It's usually where your father or mother was born, and you want to relate to it. And we all have our hometowns, though we may live or we were born in different places. So these are things that are very peculiar to the society that we belong to here.
I find it fascinating, and I could talk to you all for hours, but I'm constrained by time. Going back
Yes.
to something that you said when we were talking about the African Union, well, the organization,
Yes.
first
Yes.
of all, and that was their focus being on decolonization. And I would assume, because of the time frame, would be what was happening in South Africa as well with apartheid.
Yes.
But since those now, because you're saying that most of the persons, the countries who've signed on are no longer under colonialist rule, what then is the vision, or what is the focus for the Union today?
Well, I unfortunately, not unfortunately, but because of my political leanings, I've always been a very strong and keen supporter of Kwame Nkrumah. I've always believed that African unity is a very, very important aspect of our objectives for the future. And I think that it's African unity, having a union government, having a free movement of people, free trade, and trying to get a grasp of our own economic future. At the moment, we're very reliant on the West and developed nations, and that is holding us back a lot. So I think that gradually we have to shed off our parochiality and work towards working together as one people. Because I think before the white man came, we were sure in ourselves. We didn't regard ourselves as black people or Africans. If you were an Ashanti, you were an Ashanti. You were a Ga, you were a Ga. But the realization after the slave trade that we were a particular people with very, very unique circumstances, and we shared a common bond and tradition in a lot of ways, is what is very important. And I think that we should go a step forward, and we should get away from that. But we still have our policies and our objectives, some of our objectives being influenced by our former colonial masters, and that gives us a lot of problems.
I could well imagine us as well, by the way. We're going to continue this chat after a quick break with the Honorable Fritz Baffour, and he is former Minister of Information in Ghana and member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Communication. So
actually, I was Chairman of Defense and Interior, so that was what I was after at the end.
There you go. So yes, he's well informed, and we're really learning quite a lot here on the Link Up today, and we're going to continue to learn some more when we come back. If you've just joined us, you've missed quite a bit in terms of our reaching understanding and getting clarity today on many different subjects. Right now, we're taking a look at Africa Day, and by extension, we're taking a look at the whole reason behind the African Union and just what that means. We're chatting with Mr. Fritz Baffour, and please forgive me, but I remember having a serious, I lost it when I was reading something online and realized that there's still some people who think that Africa is a country, and they don't realize that in 2021, no, it is a continent made up of countries. So I wonder if this is one of the challenges for Africa going forward, the myths and the miscommunication and misunderstanding about the continent.
Well, I'm a historian, and so in a way, the thing is that Africa was called the Dark Continent, and now the world is now seeing that we actually brought civilization to the whole world. There's another aspect of the African Union that I didn't talk about, which is very important and pertains to the people in the Caribbean and the Americas, that all the African people and the people in the African diaspora are very much part and parcel of the objective of African unity, that Africa should be regarded as a home by any person who has some kind of link with Africa and is a member of the diaspora. And so in Ghana, for example, if you are from the diaspora, you can actually get dual citizenship. It's part and parcel of our law. And we're working very, very hard at it to make sure that anybody who is from the diaspora who wants to be a Ghanaian can have dual citizenship. And that is very much part and parcel of what the African Union, many countries in the African Union want to push forward, so that Africans everywhere will realize the importance of their ancestry, and that they have brothers and sisters on the continent and elsewhere, and then vice versa. But, you know, naturally there are problems. We are human beings and we all have our different perceptions and things like that. But the perception of Africa as a country is because of the very, very bad kind of narrative that was taught to most people outside Africa.
How does
And
one
we are now
change
telling
it?
our own story. We have
Right.
to tell our own story. We're doing our own research. We're doing our own work. What you're doing right now is very, very important. I've written a book to show people that we really are a great people. If we call Europeans great people, most of what they've achieved now came from the backs and the minds of Africans.
There's so much more in there that one can comment on, and that is, you know, the rape of your resources, you not getting your just dues when it comes to the price of those resources on the global market. And there's so much more we could talk about. But one of the things I didn't want to let pass was the violence that happens, you know, person to person, country to country.
Well, the
please,
thing is
go
that
ahead.
when you're a conquered, when you're a conquered nation, the Europeans came to Africa to pillage. They did not come with good intentions. They came to, you know, exploit our resources. And they haven't actually changed their mindset when it comes down to that. All right. And so therefore, we have got to start understanding that if we are going to prevent that, we have got to assume responsibility for our resources and our people. And the biggest resource base that we have is our human resource base, and we've not looked after it. And because of the negative influence of colonialism and the fact that we've gone into what we call neocolonialism and everything, we are fractured. All right, our narrative is wrong. We've not come to understand ourselves yet, though we're trying hard. We're not there yet, and that would lead to the fact that with poverty, with unemployment, with the bulge of youth, because in Ghana, let's say 85 to 87% of the people are under the age of 45, and that in itself, if you have unemployment, will create the wrong kind of, it will be an incendiary bomb in terms of demographics and in terms of developmental progress. So these things are coming in. That's why you have thousands of Africans now crossing and going over into Europe at great risk to their lives and things like that. And these are caused by poverty and the misuse and the mismanagement of our resources, fueled by the greed of some of our leaders, and also the fact that they are in cahoots with Europe. Because if a leader steals $1 billion, he takes it to Europe. When he dies, that $1 billion doesn't come back to Ghana or Africa. it stays in Europe and it's used for the development of Europe and America, all the other countries that are ready to exploit us. And we've just got to build the kind of resistance to that kind of exploitation. We've tried, we've taken certain steps, and it's a gradual process, but it's a very difficult process.
Quite. What do you consider some of the key achievements of the African Union?
Well, the thing is, the African Union has made it easier for us to recognize the potential of Africa, that we have a roadmap for getting there. When we'll do that, there's a song that says, we are going, heaven knows where
Heaven knows where.
We are going, but we will get there. We know we will. So it just shows you that, and the thing is that there is an appreciation, the fact that we're interacting. Right now we've got the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is going into place. We're going to see how successful that is, because it will enable us to have, we want the free movement, which is going into place. We're going to see a region for West Africa. One of the tenets of the agreement is that there should be a free movement of people and all that. So it's getting together and working together that is very, very important, and that's what we should work on.
Quite. Is it a roadmap, though, that is shared by the ordinary African? What do they want?
The ordinary African everybody wants. He wants a peace of mind. You understand? We want the peace of mind. We want the freedom of choice. We want to be able to live and look after our children and the next generation. We want development. We want good health, good education. We want, as I said, free movement. We want to have justice. We are going to have a certain freedom. Everybody knows that, but we have to work very, very hard at it, because we have people in our midst who are seeking and do not see beyond their noses.
How do you view the outreach that we've been making, our government here in Barbados, our Prime Minister, seeing the importance of that linkage, the reconnection with the motherland, Barbados?
It's an excellent move. I was in Barbados in 1994. I was on my way to Trinidad for the carnival. I went and did a documentary on the carnival. I've worked in Suriname. I met the Maroons, or for the want of a better term, they call the Bush Negroes. I was in the Amazon forest to meet them and all that. And the fact that when I went into Suriname, into the forest, I met people who were far Africans than I was, because they were untouched by Western influences that sometimes turn us into Mongols.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, quite.
Yes.
Right. What would you like to see, as far as the action goes, the development goes? What would you like to see?
Oh, it's a very, very important thing. I'm very much one for the diaspora. I grew up on a university campus, and we had a lot of lecturers from all over the world, especially from the diaspora. So I found out that we have people who are the same as us, and we share common goals, common objectives, common cultural perceptions and beliefs, you understand. So it's very, very important that the diaspora unites with Africa on a far better note. And I think that the outreach that your Prime Minister has initiated is an excellent one. We've had several, but we hope this one is sustained and that we will have the interaction. We are nurses and our medical staff are there. We expect Barbadians to come in here and teach us. We've got a lot to learn. By the way, I'm also a very rare kind of African. I love cricket. So so Garfield Sobers and all the great Barbadians are people who are my heroes.
fantastic. And how did you gain this knowledge in terms of cricket? Was it through your travels? Was it something that you had heard? How did this take place?
You know, before independence, Ghana was a British colony, so naturally we inherited the love for these games: football, cricket, hockey, netball, basketball, that kind of thing. And I was born before independence, so therefore, and then I traveled. I lived in England for a while, but I was very much very keen on cricket. And I want you to do me a favor. Find out for me whether there was a great cricketer friend of mine. We lived in Glasgow in the late 70s, Winslow Ashby. So if you can find him, tell him Ashby. Yes. Okay. I think he worked at the airport, but if he's alive, I give him my best regards and tell him I'm alive and kicking.
You know, when I think it was many years ago when I met my first Ghanaian, and I was in radio at the time, so that was enough years ago. But
yes.
One of the things that he had said was that when he landed here, he looked around and he said it was almost like home, because, you know, we looked all alike, you know. So we shared features wise, and then chatting with Victor just now, who's a registered nurse here in Barbados, you know, and culturally we mesh. So today, one of the through themes, I think, in our reaching understanding is just realizing that, you know, we're really not that different. Some of our experiences might be different, but when you look in the scheme of things, the human experience and yeah, we're really not that different.
We've got a lot more in common than we think. I mean, the thing is that the spirituality of the African means that if you and I share an ounce of blood, we'll find it one way or the other, if we're relations. You know, I found out that I had relations who live about 200 or 300 miles away somewhere, and it was because of the artificiality of how we get together through slave trade, through whatever. You understand? And so yes. I'm sure that I have relatives, people who I share DNA all over the place. And it's a very important thing that science is also making people aware that human beings are the same, and that there's no human being that is, let's say, better than the other in terms of a future and in terms of the way we do things in the world.
Quite. And how is Africa Day celebrated on the African continent? Is it really recognized as, you know...
it is a holiday. We have the... in Nkrumah's time, it was a big deal. Slowly, we're moving away from it. It's just become a holiday. We know it's Africa Day. Now with the social media, we're getting to get more information on the 1963 conference and the things that happened at the time. But in reality, it's something that we have to work on to really work on it. That is a day that we can meet other Africans and people of the diaspora, celebrate our Africanness.
Yeah. Hopefully not hampered by COVID. Hopefully, you know, this pandemic would just ease. We can go back to some semblance of normalcy and be the social animals that we are, you know, as human beings, and get an opportunity to see each other face to face rather than digitally, electronically. How has the pandemic treated you, sir? Have you been good?
Well, it kept me home. One thing did is that my wife then decided to have a little garden in the back of the house, and she put on some beds.
I think that we might have lost the connection. Oh dear. All right, well, I'll just, because time has run out, but Mr. Bafour, I hope you're hearing me. Thank you so much. We've lost the connection. But thank you very much for helping us today to reach understanding. Thank you so much for joining us on the Link Up. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed the information shared today, and you will take that knowledge with you into your community, wherever you are. And I want you, as always, as I always say, please stay safe and stay well. Follow the protocols. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll be back next week with the Link Up.